Привет, Владимир!
Hello, Vladimir. So please tell us what became obvious about the Russian economy during the last 7 days. There are several funny news actually coming out of there. Now we cannot be talking more about gasoline production because they made it a secret to show how well they control the situation. So perhaps share more of the events and things that you paid attention to. Hello, everybody. It was a very rich week for different events, and of course, we can start with gasoline. It's a complete joke. They indeed decided after last time, remember, we discussed that they hit the minimum since February for gasoline production since February. So all these UAV strikes on their production capabilities actually do work. So they decided to make it secret. And as they officially formulated, to prevent market manipulations by bad faith players. And I think they put us in that category that we've been discussing these materials. So the only thing that is available now is pricing publication. And by the way, retail continues to grow. It grew about a ruble and a half since the beginning of this year. It's not a quick growth, but it continues to grow. And that secrecy over the gasoline production, I think, indicates that they have serious systemic issues, and they don't want to reveal how serious Ukraine strikes are destroying their oil processing capabilities. And we got additional information that Lukoil is getting ready to launch ABTS-6 and cut cracking facilities in June. These are Reuters sources, don't know what will happen out of it, we'll see, but they've been trying to repair it for quite a while now. And I think this overall is an indicator that situation in the industry is bad, without any chances to get better, and they decided to just put a secrecy on all the production of gasoline for now. And by the way, if you noticed, last week there haven't been much activity of destroying any of the oil processing capabilities. True, Vladimir, but there were several successful hits on the oil and gasoline storage facilities, Kavkaz and a couple others. You've seen the fires and explosions there. Yeah, they were in the media. Right. So we think that they change targets and they basically do a two-step. They hit the processing and then they hit storage. Right, Michael. So if they continue hitting these oil refining capabilities, we see that they are actually trying to repair them. It just takes them a long time. But overall, they definitely are in the red, in the land of big issues due to these drone attacks. Now, another hot topic is taxation. Minister of Finance is looking to gather 3 trillion of income from economy with increasing the taxes. Right, it has never been like that, and now again, indeed. So I think disproportional discussion here is concentrating on tax on the physical persons, while it's only 20% of this overall projected income. And I made a graph where you can see that over 60% that is expected to grow taxation base is the tax on the profits of companies. And this is a serious story for economy. They want to gather 1.6 trillion rubles through increasing the tax on profits, tax on income. And the profit spent for investments, according to Rosstat, by business companies was about 14 trillions. So over 10% of that amount they're going to cut with this taxation, and it will lead to price growth and it will lead to additional stagnation in the economy. And there is one more thing that was not observed or discussed much, but the serious concern for the businesses and private businesses in Russia. So one of them is a sharp increase in taxation on small businesses. How do they do that? First, they increase the simplified taxation bracket, so make it up to 450 million rubles a year. So even somewhat bigger businesses can register for simplified tax payment. But then, starting from 60 millions, and that's a very low threshold for any business. I think one could set the qualifying bracket for small business starting with 800 million to a billion. Everything below that shouldn't even be affecting with taxation and stuff, and will give more freedom to really small businesses, more opportunities. But they've increased the bracket, and starting from 60 million, everybody will have to pay value-added tax. And I don't know how to simplify taxation. It should be simple, just one payment, right? But they're adding VAT to that. So in my view, this is a real bend-over action for most of businesses, and they want to impose additional burden worth of 300 billion rubles on the smaller companies. And I want to explain here that I'll be countered that with Minister of Finance statement that they are fighting with breaking the companies when the big company splits itself into several smaller entities and pays simplified taxes. But in reality, these are components of a bigger company. Right. Vlad, I think it's a strange explanation because it actually is prohibited by law in Russia. There are several of the criminal prosecutions happening now because of that. So what's the additional reason to change the taxation code when you already are fighting it in a different way? Right, Michael, and one has to note that their automation has reached a fantastic level of 1984. Their IRS has direct access to companies' accounting software. 1S, a very famous one, very popular in Russia. So it is all see-through, it is all transparent. And now you have additional AI that you can use for this stuff. So all these additional schemes of separating companies, they're notable, right? They're easy to catch. Indeed, it's difficult. One has to make an effort not to catch them. And it's visible. There are a lot of people are involved. As the saying goes, what two people know, everybody knows. But they're just trying to raise more money from smaller businesses. Right. So let me ask you this. You're talking about what will happen as a result of it. Why? What is the real cause for such a raising in taxation? Are they running out of money? And we can discuss further whether it will hit the consumer, but I personally think there is no taxation that doesn't hit on the consumer's pocket. What's the bigger reason why they're doing it? Well, they're looking for harmless. They're looking for those who cannot defend themselves. They had a similar incursion into the large businesses, and then large businesses agreed with the government that, okay, we will somehow tolerate 25% profit taxation increase. And then Putin's regime is looking for a way to raise more money. And if you can see, these different suggestions were permeating media sphere for a while. They understood it will be a hit for economy, but I think they reached the point where they're saying, oh, to hell with economy, we just need to gather a few 100 billion rubles. So this idea to make simplified taxpayers to pay VAT tax, that was on the table for a while, but it was always rejected. So now they finally have no force to reject it, really. They have to implement that. And they attack those who cannot defend themselves. A couple more interesting moments. They decided to make alcohol that is being used in pharmaceuticals and medication production, they made it an excise good. So they want to raise additional 20 billion from it. So they're talking about some undercover production of alcohol for pharmaceuticals that is actually being sold as drinking alcohol, and that's bullshit. That's not a non-story. So they're just looking for other venues to raise more money. Right, Vlad, if you have an illegal production, I think it's universal lie detector test. If you have an illegal production, then close illegal production, right? Why are you implementing additional blanket measures against everybody that affect other spheres if you're just talking about illegal actions? Right. If they're doing that, they basically just spreading that burden onto everybody. That means that this is a blatant lie. And given that half the country is actually involved in some sort of repression apparatus, it would be very easy to suppress illegal production. I think they're looking to raise more money. Exactly, Michael. And I think many people do not understand how digitized that whole situation throughout the country. So Minister of Finance, they actually see or can see every company that they want to take a look at. I had an acquaintance in Moscow who was building a special accounting software for pharmacists because they have a very specific way they track the goods and they pay certain taxations and everything. So it is all see-through. As he was saying, there's nothing you can hide. So all these explanations, these are for the birds. Also, another interesting thing, they've been trying to lure IT professionals to the country for a while. They've been giving additional taxation privileges for the IT companies, zero income tax, and not anymore. Now they're facing a 5% tax on their income. And yeah, so that's what they've been doing. The other interesting thing about this taxation package is that just a very brief moment ago, they said that nothing like that will happen. No increase on physical persons taxation, no increase or establishing any taxation for IT companies. If you can raise all those Putin's messages and speeches to the Federal Assemblies every time he's saying, no, no, we're not touching you. And here, boom, here you go. So the markets react to that rather badly, and market analysts are saying that that situation will lead to a serious drop in investments and in costs on the stock market. And here's a headliner from RBC. Everything falls. I love that channel now. I think they're actually pretty honest in talking about all these processes. You know, Vlad, they'll probably be considered to be foreign agents soon by Putin's government. Oh yeah, sure, they'll get there. So now we'll go to inflations. Everybody is waiting for the 7th of June announcement of raising the rate by the central bank, and business is in double grief because on one hand it's being milked with taxation, and on the other there is probably going to be an increase in central bank refinancing rate. So we'll talk about that more, but the macroeconomic picture as we see is that we will not leave difficult times in any foreseeable future. If just a few months ago people were even discussing that probably central bank will slow down inflation and will bring the refinancing rate down, and no, nothing like that is transpiring. And everything is looking horrible, and that publication, Everything Falling, is exactly about that. Their pessimism is growing to such a degree that Ministry of Finance on the 29th of May failed to conduct an auction on the federal bonds because they asked for the percentage for the returns was too high. They could not tolerate that. So they're already losing that as a tool. Financial situation is looking worse and worse for them, and they're running out of different ways to raise more money, more income. All right, please do not forget to click the like button to subscribe. It's important for us and for other viewers to see this material. Click that like button, and if you can, of course, become a supporter, join our channel. And now let's return back to Vladimir Milov and talk more about Russian economy. What else? So we do have additional data. Remember, we talked that during January to April, the first 4 months, budget deficit was 1.5 trillion rubles, so almost what they planned for the whole year. That data was the Ministry of Finance data. Now we got additional data from the Federal Treasury that actually shows it to be 4 trillion and not 1.5. This is a number of a whole other magnitude, and a lot of people trying to understand and deduce the difference between two numbers. My version is as follows, that the deficit, of course, is bigger than 1.5 trillions. But what Ministry of Finance is trying to do, they're trying to calculate income that came a bit later as still April income, and expenses they're trying to minimize by spreading over April and May, and that diminishes the numbers for January to April. And they definitely are manipulating some of the numbers. They are brushing them up. They're trying to keep a somewhat controlled deficit to the end of the year, till December. In reality, that deficit is definitely higher, and we'll see it closer to the end of the year. Additional data coming from Rosstat about industrial production and military complex. And here, remember, we discussed in February that spike in production. You can see it here on the chart. You can see that it was some individual case. The tempo did fall. They're still rather high at 20-30% growth year over year, but still it's not 40 or 50. So you can see that it was probably some long-term delivery of items that take a long cycle to produce, and it was more of an anomaly. And military production is returning into the usual framework where they cannot grow it in such a high rate. The only area where they're rather successful in keeping over 40% is in electronics. That's where it probably is simpler for them for different reasons, but we'll see how freezing imports of electronics from China, because the payment system is inactivated between them. And we'll see if that will start having implications on their drones and UAVs production. By the way, overall, according to April data, the industrial productivity data started to slow down. It went below 4%, seriously below the previous month. So there are no magic wands, all these pretty numbers that you may have heard before. That was mostly related to the fact that in February and March they had some high volume or high deliverables in those months, and that was a one-time deal story. That apparently did not shift the market long-term and doesn't give them any long-term perspective. What else can we say here on the military-industrial complex? Deputy Minister of Finance Kolochev made a statement that they can increase expenses of the federal budget on the background of rather stable profits from the oil market. And I'm thinking that Belosov, that new figure they brought in together with Chemezov, will come to Putin's government asking for more money. So they'll increase military budget even more. Wait a second, he was put there to optimize the budget and he's coming there asking for more money? Right, but he cannot really navigate that situation in any different fashion. Three factors affected. Remember last time we talked about Chemezov, who said that a military complex has a zero profitability. That means that they will have to increase prices for what they produce. Second, payments to military and to everybody involved in this industry. You can see what happens with inflation in Russia, and even with one-time payments of 1 million rubles, which is about $10,000, does not attract enough volunteers to fight Putin's war. That means that they'll have to increase the payouts. Third pillar is logistics. And there is a hypothesis that he may actually make that part more orderly, fighting with corruption, but logistics has a small budget, less than $1 trillion for the whole army from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. So here, whether you fight corruption or not, you just need more money. So he has a window now, as he just coming to his position. Great strategist, asking for more money to do great deals. Right. And I'm quite sure that in the next few months, we'll see another announcement about the increase of military budget, probably from 11 trillion to 15 or something like that. And we can understand then why they're trying to raise more taxes in this light. So there are hints about the growth of military expenditures coming from different directions, so likely we should monitor that. That's likely going to happen. Another point about taxation, a lot of people are discussing that progressive taxation of physical persons. Two aspects here. One is that our country is presented very destitute when high salaries are considered to be income from $2,000 to $4,000 a month. And this is according to the inner discussion there, how it is presented. High salaries need to be taxed, but these salaries that are taxing is from $2,000 to $4,000. That just shows how low the overall income for people is in this country. And people with these salaries are only at 3%. This shows how destitute the whole Russia has become under Putin. And that's under changed inflation. This is not $2,000 that we say 5 years ago, right? It's different according to the prices that grew. And in rubles, if we switch back to rubles, it's 200,000 rubles. This is not the money that they were 5 years ago. In a big city, it's not really a luxurious living. And this is considered to be uber rich according to the Russian tax code. Remember Putin's interview when he said that middle class starts with 17,000 rubles, right, with about $170. Indeed, so the growth of prices almost twice since the beginning of this war for fast-turning consumer goods, doubling of that price is horrible. So you cannot really live a luxurious life on this monies that they consider to be super income. Another interesting point when they're saying in Russia that, well, in the West you also have progressive taxation. Indeed, the West has it, but in the West you can notice that really rich people, they're not paying taxation on that income. They're paying taxes from property. Their actual income taxes are very low. And we often hear that one billionaire is paying maybe 1%, another is paying 3%. Trump declared, I think he paid $700 one of the years. The rich people, they have different ways of reinvesting their profits, and there is a very complex system of deductions by which they get tax refunds to them. How I see progressive taxation of physical persons, it's basically a tax on the qualified labor. This is my understanding of that tax. It's a little different from colloquial, but for your whole life. You've been investing in your education, in honing your skills. Eventually, you are becoming a qualified pilot or programmer or a sea captain or maybe a CNC machinist. And now you, while somebody was just doing some silly job, he's paying less of a tax. And from you, because you actually were honing your skills and you're increasing your qualifications to be able to get higher salary, you're being taken more money from. And I think this is not exactly a fair approach. I think I'm personally in favor of a flat tax. So you would tax the same ruble in the same fashion, regardless of who's paying that. They're also screaming about another issue, the cadre deficit. And that's on one hand. On the other hand, they are increasing taxation on the IT companies and they're increasing taxation on the qualified salaries of the specialists. So here is a disconnect somewhere in my head. And I think the effect of this process will be that a lot of people of higher qualified professions, remember, they were looking abroad, they were thinking about moving. There was a situation when pilots are moving to Central Asia because they're paid better, situation is better for them there. Or a sea captain, this is a very deficit profession in the world. It's easy for them to leave the country and work abroad somewhere. I'm not even talking about the IT and financial experts. Those are absolutely easy to move to any country and start working there. So, right, they're, for some reason, Vlad, they're thinking that if some IT people returned, they'll be able to milk them easier for their money. And I'm talking to Russian expats here in other countries. I'm telling them, look, right now they're luring you back in because they have issues, but eventually they will dump you because Putin's regime always cheats on you. It always deceives you, whether you are a military, an IT professional, your own bureaucrat or whatever, ministers of defense, they don't care. They'll have you all. And we can see now that this is happening even faster than some people predicted. And all these golden mounds that were promised by Putin's regime, they're dwindling in front of our eyes. Indeed, you've been talking about that. I was talking about this. And it's important to fix it now, that affirm it, that now that this moment is here. That's a material proof that they are now fucking everybody up. And these are not some random prognostications. This is what's happening right now. So they canceled the tax benefits, tax preferences for the IT companies. This year they made it 5%. What do you think will preclude them from making it 10%? Nothing. And 2 years from now, gather all the IT professionals and put them in forced labor camps and make them work for the government, programming whatever they need. Right, exactly. So pay attention. They said 3% of population is roughly going to be targeted by this tax. That tells you how narrow is a percent of population of highly qualified experts. Very, very slim. So I'm quite sure that this percentage will drop even further and qualified people will only start leaving the country even more. And absolutely, they should be doing it before they close the borders. Now we can see that the West is a little more lenient in getting Russian experts, and they understand that they should not be expunging or expelling the ones that can bring more effort to more work to their GDP. So it is a good moment for those Russians who want to leave the country. And until Putin's government realizes that the candy didn't work, and before they start using the whip, it's a good window for professionals to basically pack their shops and requalify themselves as immigrants and start building their career, rebuilding their career abroad. Perhaps with a smaller number of resources, but with a higher stability that nobody will come and change the rules of the game or the whole board in a year or even in 6 months. Right, remember at the end of 22, there was a whole campaign about that. We talked about it exactly. That on one hand, Russia went through the first shock of sanctions and nothing is too bad and they have still some money. And on the other hand, they were also promising to the IT professionals that we will give you special conditions. You'll feel like you're enjoying communism or something. Inflation actually went to the background in light of these events, but it hasn't slowed down. The weekly inflation is still high, and the annual is too. In annual expression, it reached 8.1%, according to last week's data. And we're seeing the headlines in the media that the rate can become as high as 18%, that banks are increasing their percent for borrowing, and everybody is already preparing for the growth of central bank rate. Top manager of foreign exchange bank is considering, actually in the interview said that they will be increasing the rate up to 18%. And they are talking about increasing it for several years, so it's not going to be short term. There is a consensus now being formed with the society at large that 18% is going to stay there for a while. And here's what's happening. On one side, they're squeezing more from people and businesses and taxation. And on the other hand, they're also increasing the rate. I know people were expecting the rate to drop down to 6 or 7%, but instead, the verdict is no, it's going to increase. The life is not going to be better for you. And I want to say it has been 10 months since central banks started to increase the rate, trying to stifle the inflation. And I want our viewers to agree here that it's a complete fiasco. That's not how you regulate the inflation. Right, there is nothing more permanent than temporary, Vlad, and that temporary increase of rate is turning into the permanent. Remember 2 or 3 weeks ago, we discussed that they're all hoping that this rate will go down. And you were saying, I remember that moment when you said, F you and not the lower rate. And indeed, they're getting F'd now at large, and any opportunity is being closed for them. And I like it. They're cutting off more and more of the market mechanisms, which actually helped them survive the first 2 years of war and the pressure of sanctions. It's not shooting yourself in the leg, but it's 1,000 paper cuts that I hope will eventually lead to those legs falling off. Another thing, Michael, that impresses me here is the low quality of their analytical system. Remember, several months, Nabiullina was telling us that she's seeing some deflationary processes. I want to ask, where are they? Because everything now, however you see it, the whole consensus now is that the politics, economic politics are worthless. They failed to stop the inflation. So a fun question, who would have been a better central bank chair, Nabiullina or you and myself? Oh no, Nabiullina is like Nuchubais in Russia. I understand that everybody hates her inside of Russian politics, their congressmen and everybody, they hate her. Yeah, I think a little more and her head will be chopped off. She will be forced to resign from her position. That same Chemezov is mentioning in his interview, is already complaining that they cannot take a credit unless the government actually subsidizes it, so that the real rate would be maybe 5%. So the pressure will be horrible. And I think she gambled there. She risked a bit to see if she can maybe scare everybody with stern fiscal policies, and it'll work out somehow. It's like in that anecdote, train, I command you to stop, 1, 2, right? I think what is going to happen on the next week, we'll see on the 7th of June, they have that meeting on the rate, whether they will increase it or not. I think it's not so important as the fact that this harsh monetary policies that keeps ignoring reality is basically a failed policy. And they don't have any good conclusions or any good options. And what are they to do now? To ease it? Okay, but it will be higher inflation then, right? So if on the backdrop of a serious inflationary process, you drop in a lot of money to the market, inflation grows even higher. So it's a stalemate situation. You cannot increase, you cannot decrease. And the situation economically that Putin brought the whole society into, monopolistic, corrupt, non-transparent, that is by default set to increase prices and increase profits of the select few. That is based on the Chinese supplies where consumer goods have already been getting more expensive. So just by the fact of transporting them across such large distances. So that's the core things that need addressing. Monetary policies, that's a top-level construct. You cannot solve everything by addressing that. You cannot fix the economy that is China-centric in a country that is fighting a big war by additional economic policies up above. Right, the fame in a country that is embattled in the war that it started in under failing Putin's regime, the fame is a very short-lived thing. Nabiullina, who was praised a year ago, now is becoming the scapegoat. and all the measures she has taken being criticized as not helping businesses and killing them. And it's been just a half-year difference. Right. Speaking of China, by the way, we still get a lot of concerning news from there. First of all, that pompous Putin's visit to Xi Jinping has not unblocked any of those financial payments that are still cancelled, still not operational. Also, a lot of Chinese players are withdrawing from Russian market, for example, Alibaba. And Alibaba is the owner of AliExpress, so there are people in Russia who are seriously concerned with AliExpress withdrawing from Russia too. For now, AliExpress still remains because Alibaba is mostly wholesale trade, but there likely will appear additional consolidated players, additional party that will be buying from Alibaba and bringing it to Russia bulk. So additionally, you'll probably face 10 to 15% growth. All these Wildberries and some other companies there, that's where their business model is based off. Also, there was information in the media about Alibaba seriously limiting its investments in the daughter of AliExpress, Russia. They basically cut personnel by 50% and canceled all the capital investment programs. So I would not be surprised if anything like that does happen with AliExpress as well, because it seems that trend is forming up. Another interesting thing, expectedly ruble is above 90 per dollar, and euro is already storming the rate of 100. As I said, it was a temporary strengthening, and now it continues to weak. Oil continues to go down. Its Brent is lower than 81 per dollar per barrel, and I was hoping that next time we'll record after OPEC market meeting, and there is not much expectations from that organization. A lot of analysts are writing that OPEC continues to cheat. A lot of participants of that deal, OPEC Plus community, continues to extract more oil than they have promised. Russia, for example, fulfilled only about a third from the promised decline in oil extraction. So they likely will conduct some additional meeting in between now and our next stream, but I think there'll be a lot of things to duke out between participants of this OPEC about them failing to execute on the promises they made. But if you look at the price on the oil market, the market does not value the actions of OPEC as successful. Yeah, I sincerely hope that OPEC will fail as an organization, and every participant will start pumping as they like, so it'll cause more decline in oil prices. Also, bad stats coming from China, issues in the Eurozone, and I don't see any driver that could push the continuous economic improvement and more need for oil. This is a scenario repeated over and over again. When they diminish the oil extraction, they start squabbling between each other. This is a very truthful scenario. We've seen it time and time again repeated. Right. I think that the country's participants, they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And nobody likes just diminishing their profits. They do like to keep their margins, and they do like their profits. Exactly. That's where the conflicts start to flourish. To conclude, there are a couple more items that deserve additional attention. To continue the topic of near frontline regions, I think they pushed Gladkov, the governor of Belgorod district, a little too far. He demanded to stop payments for any damages caused to health and the vehicles of those people who refuse to withdraw or to move away from the near front regions. And I'm not usually surprised at things pushed out by this government, but every time there is some part of my hair that's still getting up. People were living, they had their own property, they had their own homes. You guys started the war, and as a result, you forced them to leave the places where they lived for decades, maybe hundreds of years. And you also blame them to be guilty, that they refuse to move. And you're blaming them that they're horrible, so we're not going to compensate them. You start the war, but you're not going to compensate everybody who falls prey or victim to that. You know, it's difficult to shock me, but our Russian authorities still continue doing that time and time again. I think one can see that these problems of near-front regions will continue affecting situation at large. There'll be rather sharp issues, black hole and the funnel that will be creating significant difficulties for the region. Also, there was a big issue with SDEC. This is the biggest courier company in Russia, and this is exactly the thing that we've been talking about. Because of the imperfection of digital architecture, these issues will continue to arise, and it's not clear whether it was a hacker attack. Some hackers actually took pride in that, but people are concerned and saying that probably not so. The issue is that, as we talked before, that 2/3 of Russian companies are very vulnerable in the realm of cybersecurity, because Russian solutions for that, they're subpar. So it's not clear whether it was an actual hacker's attack or it was a digital malfunction because of the sanctions and lack of the proper digital infrastructure and lack of good specialists. And these things will continue. And people are using these courier services rather at large in Russia. It's a big part of economic model now. But okay, one thing is a courier service. What if the banks follow suit or Russian railroads? Then it will be a whole set of the economic issues that they'll be facing that they'll have to address. Recently in South Africa, there were elections held where the first time after apartheid, Mandela's party failed to get the majority. And one of the issues of the voters to that party that they presented were continuous issues with infrastructure, electricity, internet, water, other things. Yeah, and I'll put here in the framework that Mandela Party doesn't mean that it's a good party automatically. The situation there is more complex than that. Let's call it the ruling party in South African Republic. So just to explain it to some viewers who have not paid attention to South Africa. So it's a party, African National Congress, that basically turned into a branch of Beijing and Moscow. We can talk about that later. And another element, there are several factors that can seriously affect inflationary processes. For example, we prognosticate the rise of prices for automobile cargo transfers, 20%. There is nothing to add here. We talked about that, and prices were growing, and yeah, now we see another 20% hike. And also significant consequences of the frostbite that happened this spring. They're rather serious for economy. The growers lost over half of the future crops for the season. It will definitely affect fruit and apples. And Patrushev, new deputy prime minister, who said that, a son of the original Patrushev, he said that they lost 1 million hectares, mostly grains, because of this spring frostbites. It's not too much, but overall they're usually planting about 40 million hectares, so it's a notable part. And I think as a result it likely will have effect down the road on the pricing. And we can see that different factors affecting the price from different angles, there are plenty. And I think here we can conclude. Next week will be super rich with events. There'll be a central bank meeting and they'll be discussing new rate. There'll be new data, Ministry of Finance for May, new stat for April. So get ready, it'll be rather interesting. And actually this week was not bad either, right? All right, yes, thank you so much, Vlad. See you in a week. Till later. Goodbye, everybody.